With that, we're going to move ahead to item number 4 on our agenda, which is the discussion of the Office of the City Auditor's audit and report of APD's recruiting and hiring. If you guys could come join us and introduce yourselves. Thank you again for being patient with us.
No problem. So I'm Corey Stokes. I'm the City Auditor here in Austin. This is Kathy Harrison. She was the manager on this project, and we'll do a quick presentation to just kind of give you an overview of this project. And I think in the backup you'll also have the full report as well as a copy of the presentation. So in this audit, our objective was to look at whether APD was effectively, efficiently, and equitably, lots of words there, recruiting and hiring sworn staff. I get to click for myself too. Excellent. So we looked at this audit in part because of staffing shortages you guys are well aware of among police officers, and the department's kind of struggle to attract enough offers or enough applicants to fill vacancies. And that vacancy rate has continued to increase since 2021, as you can kind of see here in this pretty picture. So throughout our audit, we talked to APD staff about a lot of different reasons that could be impacting vacancies. I think the being out of contract for a long period, low pay, a lack of community trust. As you know, the contract ended in March 2023. New contract was signed in October of 2024, and that's some of the period during which we were looking kind of heavily focused for this audit. The new contract, I think, has some things in there that may help. So as you guys know, the increased pay, kind of getting us more in line with peers. So those are things that we see as helpful. But here we looked at kind of various recruiting and hiring goals that the department had, the strategies, the efforts that APD was undertaking. But our range was really looking, again, back at that, looking here, we were trying to look at kind of 2020 through 2024 as we were doing our work. So we had 2 findings in audit speak. So first finding really talked about APD's recruitment strategy and really saying we don't think that the strategy itself was effective, and I'll talk a little bit more about why, in order to increase the number of sworn staff, which is what we thought the goal should be. So more detail on that. Just looking at best practices. So this is the nerdy thing that auditors get to do. It's great. We get to go out and see, okay, what should this look like in other departments, or what do other people that have done research in this area, what do they say we should see in a recruitment strategy? And so these are the things laid out here. So should have a measurable objectives, a detailed plan for how to achieve those objectives as they're working through it. They should have a process to evaluate whether or not they're effective. And then kind of in addition to that, we have some tools like social media that we could use to kind of broaden our reach. And then specifically recruitment activities, which I'll talk a little bit more about. So we did find that APD has, or does not have, sorry, when we talk about recruitment activities, and specifically to increase the diversity of cadets. So things like hosting recruiting events at military institutions, looking at historically Black colleges and universities or local high schools. So they do have, sorry, I said do not, but I was trying to say they do have those, excuse me. And in those ways, they use those opportunities to try to be proactive, in addition to creating, identifying diversity in those events, and then also focusing on women specifically at those events. So I say that's happening, but it didn't feel kind of like a formal strategy or formal plan to achieve that, and no measurement, or we didn't see measurement to make sure that, when we set an objective, we're making progress towards it. So I think that's the first finding overall. Second finding really looked at existing recruiting programs, and we concluded, so the idea is that, again, in best practices, that recruiting pipelines help you increase interest in law enforcement careers. And there's a mention in the 2024-2029 APD strategic plan about enhancing those pipelines, but we just didn't really see that. So idea is to give a series of opportunities for somebody to learn about the department starting early. So maybe, starting in middle school, high school, post-high school, and basically programs that feed into and coordinate it with each other so that and future applicants, get direct experience in law enforcement, and they might be inspired to join the department. We just didn't really see this at APD, and more specifically on that. We really saw one recruitment program at APD, specifically the Criminal Justice Pathways Program, which serves high school and colleges in Austin. But we didn't see the program really kind of creating this consistent pipeline or engaging with students over time. So it's kind of more of a one-off, I guess, a one-time glimpse into law enforcement. We also we saw other entities that had an apprenticeship program or an internship program to provide interested adults with an opportunity to engage and work with the department without having to join the academy. And so we just felt like this was another area where more could be done to try to create this pipeline. And we did learn that APD had an internship program in the past and was discontinued due to staffing. But I'd say overall, those are kind of our two big messages. And then the recommendations, we had 4 recommendations. First, not surprisingly, is craft a kind of more effective recruitment strategy and action plan, measurable targets, all the stuff we talked about. The second actually is kind of something we didn't talk about in the findings necessarily, but is really about the reliability of recruitment data. So one of the things we wanted to do was see, like, how are we tracking who comes in and what happens to them along the way. And when we're looking at that data, we felt like it wasn't super reliable, which is something that we as auditors really want it to be. And so we have a recommendation related to that. And specifically to address those is to update their standard operating procedures and train staff to make sure that they can be more consistent, or the data gets more consistently entered so they have that information when they go to look at what's working, what's not working. The third one had to do with social media, as I mentioned, coordinating with the larger APD social media. So there's a recruiting social media page, but then a larger APD page, and doing some coordination there to get a broader reach. There's a significant, kind of huge difference between the number of followers of just the recruiting page versus the whole APD page, not surprisingly. The last recommendation is about creating more opportunities for applicants to explore a career. So that could be an internship program or apprenticeship program, or filling in some of the gaps of that pipeline. So APD agreed with the recommendations, and that is the short version of our audit.
Sergeant Nelson, were you guys going to have a follow-up presentation? Couldn't remember. Chief Henderson, were we going to have a brief presentation from you guys as well?
Yes, ma'am. I have a presentation ready to go.
Great.
Cool. And so did we want to transition to that, or were they going to
I think so. Let's go ahead.
ALPR, since they're already at the microphone? Okay.
Fine, either way.
Actually, no, I would rather divide up the presentations. If we can go ahead and continue with recruiting, that would be great. And then we'll switch back to the ALPR program. I don't think my brain can keep up with that today. So,
Alrighty. Thank you. And so, good afternoon, everyone. Chief of Staff Robin Henderson for the Austin Police Department, and just want to present on APD's response to the Auditor's Office of our recruiting program. So, of course, want to thank the Auditor's Office for the work that they did, and also thank my team over at recruiting. Worked very collaborative with each other on putting together the information that was needed for the Auditor's Office to put this audit together. So if we can switch to next slide, please. Thank you. And so just wanted to go over just our current sworn allocation. So we're currently allocated 1,816 authorized officer or sworn positions. And as of May 28, 2025, we currently have 332 vacancies. And then just sworn separations over the year, just wanted to kind of highlight that we were attriting officers at a very high rate when we were out of contract. But now that we are back under contract, that attrition rate has essentially slowed tremendously. Next slide. Cool. And this is just another breakdown of our vacancy rate. You will see a little bit of an anomaly there when we start to kind of have a decrease in the vacancy rate, but please understand That's because there was 150 positions that were removed from our staffing. And so that's a little bit of a artificial in that you have to consider, you'll see where the asterisks are, where there was a double asterisk, where there was a reduction in our personnel. So it adjusts our vacancy to a lower number. So if we were to include those positions, it would be higher than what it represents now. Next slide. Just want to give you a highlight of our recruiting team. We have 1 commander and 1 lieutenant, 2 sergeants, 16 recruiting officers. They also do background investigators. And then we have a support staff of 1 recruitment staff and then 11 background investigators that are part-time employees. Next slide. Just want to talk about some of the, I would say, things going on within the organization that contributed to some of the outcomes related to the auditor's findings. Primarily is that during the evaluation period, we had a pause of cadet classes. In addition to, as I mentioned, we were out of contract, in addition to our very high attrition rate. And so a combination of those things, among others, contributed to some of those findings as far as having time to devote towards keeping up certain programs. The auditor's office mentioned an internship program that we were no longer supporting. That's because we didn't have the personnel to do that, just because of our attrition rate. Also, it affected our ability to hire candidates when we are out of contract, because we have to stick solely to, you might hear the term TCOL, that's Texas Commission on Law Enforcement hiring requirements, meaning we can only host 1 test that has to be taken in the state of Texas at one time to create a hiring list for candidates for a single class. And then we cannot open a new cycle until every person who has passed that written exam has made it through the vetting process, given an offer letter, and a class starting. So you can see how that would seriously delay our ability to get more recruits or candidates in the door, because we can't open up the doors until we have completely closed out a hiring cycle. So now that we're back under contract, we're in a better position to hire. Next slide. And this is just a response. The auditor's office had previously presented this to council, and so just wanted to include this in our report out of information to you. When we were talking about the information or the time period in which the auditor's office evaluated, just want to highlight that it also included the year 2020, where we had the pause of cadet classes. So we had quite a few cadets drop out of that class, although they had already been given offer letters. Because there was a pause, that class was essentially delayed start for about a year, just shy of a year and a half. And then the pilot academy then resumed. Not all the persons who had originally been given offer letters were still interested in joining the department at that time, and that started June of 2021. Council also had a question related to filming content in order to help with our recruiting efforts. One of the things that we did want to highlight is that there is new legislation that does not allow a department to film law enforcement for entertainment purposes. You might have heard of live PD, anything like that. Cops were no longer able to do that. Now we can film generic content for recruiting purposes only, but it can't be on an actual response to call for service where we're showing actual members of the community that we are responding to a call for service on. It can just be general interactions like at a community event, something like that. And then next question that they had was related to a boost in our applications and whether or not we had received a boost in that based on the outcomes or having a new contract in place. Can y'all hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, all right, okay, good. And so just wanted to highlight to council that yes, we have shown an increase in the number of applications that we've had ever since we've had the contract passed, and that's for the 155th cadet class. Is going to be the first class that we're hiring underneath the new contract, and we had 89 make it through on that process. Next slide. And then just wanted to go over our response to the recommendations. And next slide. So for recommendation 1, we did agree with some of the findings that the auditor's office had related to creating a data-driven recruiting model. And in order to do that, we are going to be intentional about better engagement with our diverse communities while we do recruit at HBCUs. In addition to military, we're also expanding that to women-focused colleges, and also working on having a more involved process when it comes to colleges that have a criminal justice program or criminal justice nexus, that will also be including them in our rotation of campuses that we visit. Enhancing our marketing campaign, in addition to making sure that whatever we do, we want to make sure we're intentional about recruiting qualified candidates, and then maintaining those relationships with candidates, whether or not they're not able to complete the application process because they don't have appropriate paperwork, or either they can't, there's a life event that happens that somehow slows their progress becoming integrated into a next class. We're creating those touch points to where recruiters will continually maintain and keep contact with them. In addition, we're providing different strategies to have detailed goals and objectives related to our hiring cycles when we open them, what those touch points are where we have good engagement with our recruiters, what type of events garner more better qualified applicants, and then making sure we then ingest that into our processes moving forward. Next slide. And then working on short-term and long-term goals in response to this recommendation. We wanted to make sure that we provide training and guidance to help minimize any kind of entry errors to our recruiting personnel. One thing that the auditor's office mentioned related to data was the tracking of applicants, which we did notice that depending on when the touch point was where an applicant possibly did not continue in the process, you would have to go to that touch point when that actually happened, as opposed to having just a holistic data set where you could look at and say, oh, this person dropped out at this point in time, and we could look at it at one data spreadsheet, as opposed to having to go into different data forms indicating where somebody might have dropped out. So tracking, yes, when a applicant did not continue in the process, but not a holistic picture to where you can look at every single person who applied, and on that one sheet, you'd be able to identify, oh, this is where the person dropped out. You would physically have to go back and find that touch point when that happened. So we've also updated our standard operating procedures to make sure that those processes are implemented and will remain in place for continuity of operations when we do get new personnel. In addition, we are working on hiring a professional trained data analyst to help with our decision-making process, help identify any other gaps, and have an approach from an expertise background to help us with our data processing, retention, and making sure we have clean data. Next slide. For recommendation 2, the auditor's office actually did have a great suggestion with that, as far as sharing our recruiting material across all of our social media platforms. So of course, the APD primary one for the department, we have now integrated sharing social media recruiting information there, in addition to some of our more popular sites, such as the one for the APD helicopter, in addition to mounted patrol. And so we're finding various touch points within our organization with our social media platforms to share our recruiting efforts, in addition to LinkedIn, in addition to Facebook. So sharing across all platforms, as opposed to just solely posting recruiting material on our recruiting website and our social media platforms. Next slide. And then creating that pipeline. I mentioned that in the opening, in that we did have a internship program. However, we had to put that on pause because we did not have personnel to help support that. We wanted our internship program to be fruitful, to be a program that was something that the intern would gain benefits from, and we just didn't have the personnel to help support that. So what we are focusing on right now, we just got a grant where we will be engaging with 60 of Austin area youth from the age of 16 to 18. We will be working with the African American Youth Harvest Foundation. We'll also be working with Dr. Chiquita Eugene, who works with the youth programs for the city of Austin. And with that program, we are going to be developing a model for recruiting and mentoring. And that's going to be solely focused with high school students, creating that pipeline that we very much need into our policing in general, but more specifically the Austin Police Department. And with that program, we are actually engaging with the youth who are going to literally give us their feedback, their insight into what they find engaging, what would draw them to want to be a public servant and work for the Austin Police Department. Next slide. And just wanted to highlight that in our practices that we always do an evaluation of whether or not it is falling in line with IACP, MCCA, in addition to PERF and the DOJ. So we are always looking at processes, how we do things, and are we aligned in best practices. And so the DOJ had a recruiting blueprint in addition to the MCCA white paper. Both cite the Austin Police Department as an example of modernizing applicant standards and also innovative advertisement. Next slide. And then also we follow 5 of the PERF best practices as far as re-examining our hiring processes. Of course, we have the 30 by 30 initiative that we're just about 2 years into. In addition, having a faster recruiting timeline. Right now, the turnaround time from a very touch point when an applicant submits their application to the time to where the applicant is fully vetted is about four months. So that's a tremendous, compression of time that before it was close to a 5 to almost 6 month process. In addition, like I spoke to about social media and recruiting across all of our platforms, we've done that. In addition to we're having targeted media campaigns based on data analytics as to this is the best place that you should post and these are the best times that you should post. Also, we've updated our hiring standards, which is reflective of our Austin community standards. And we also have recruiting incentive. We were able to partner with East Texas A&M, and essentially once a recruit is hired and makes it off probation, they're able to obtain a bachelor's degree essentially for free through the City of Austin's tuition reimbursement program. And then, like I spoke to earlier, we are working on the youth program that will be starting this summer. Actually, I believe we start that next week, where we're engaging with 60 youth from the Austin area to help engage and create that pipeline. Next slide. And of course, we're always prioritizing the cadet experience, providing good customer service, making sure that we're responsive and following up, making sure that we're following data-driven approaches. We don't want to put our efforts that don't then yield the applicants that we expect as far as representing our department well and representing the City of Austin well. And then also resource optimization. We have to be efficient. We don't have the personnel to where we can not be as focused as we can or should be when it comes to efficiency. So just finding resources for optimization of efficiency. Next slide. And then just want to give you a highlight of some of the recent class that graduated, our current classes and then upcoming classes. So the 153rd cadet class graduated with 29 cadets on March 7th, and they are currently in their field training program. Then the 154th cadet class has 39 cadets, and they are scheduled to graduate on August 9th. And then the 155th cadet class, they just started, and currently we have 56 cadets in that class. And then the 156th cadet class, they are currently in their background investigations, and they will be starting on September 8th. That's right on the heels of the 154th cadet class that graduates August 29th. And we are currently having our 157th hiring cycle is open. And so if anyone who is listening is interested in applying, it's apdrecruiting.org. Again, that's apdrecruiting.org, and that current cycle is open, and that class will be starting January of 2026. And next slide. And that's all I have. Anybody have any questions?
Thank you, Chief Henderson. Do we have any questions from anyone? If I can get the commissioners back on screen, that would be great. Commissioner Bernhardt.
I'm not sure who can answer this question, but I'm curious. I mean, are officers hired when they go into the Cadet Academy, or are they hired when they graduate from the Cadet Academy?
Yes, ma'am. And so they are hired when they start a cadet class. However, they are not sworn peace officers at that point.
Sure.
They have to go through all the civil service requirements. In addition to there's mandated material that we have to cover at the federal, state, and local level. And then, of course, APD policies, city ordinances, and it's over that 8-month period of training. And then at the conclusion of the training, they will then be given a civil service exam. Then at that point, once they pass the civil service exam, that's when they become sworn peace officers. And that's when the title changes from cadet to police officer, or either probationary police officer.
Right. But
and that's when they start their field training program.
What I mean is, we're not hiring cadets, right? We're hiring peace officers. I'm just confused about why the audit didn't cover the academy. And I'm particularly confused about that because the academy has an incredibly high attrition rate. And we haven't really gotten decent explanations for why that is. And an independent set of eyes on the academy would be very helpful.
Yeah, I can speak to that. As part of scoping this audit, we have to identify a scope that is something that we can tackle in the amount of time we have. So in this case, we felt like it was important to look at how we're getting people into the system and not necessarily at the once people are in the system. The other reason we decided not to audit that right now, we had a lot of conversations about it early in this audit, was really because of all the changes and that are being made at the academy, so that are being implemented at the academy. But I think it's a great topic for us to come back to. And it's a great topic for us to come back to, and definitely something we can talk about putting on our audit plan for the future.
I will piggyback on Commissioner Bernhardt's. I think I brought this up when I talked to the audit team early on when I first said, I think it's really a disservice to see. It's helpful to see this recruiting end to some extent, but the bigger issue is the retention.
Sure.
And once we get them in the door, that's when the investment in the cadet actually starts. That's when the city's dollars really start to get spent. And being able to hold on to those cadets once they've entered the APD Academy's door, I think is potentially even more critical. I know that the pipeline is important. But with that, I had a question about just the staff that takes care of the recruiting process. I saw that it was a commander, a lieutenant, 2 sergeants, and there's some officers. What kind of turnover do we have in that department? How long, on average, are these sworn staff in charge?
Yes, ma'am. Thank you for the question. So our staff that is at the recruiting department, they have a pretty good retention rate there. There is not that much turnover with our recruiting personnel. Those that are there are very motivated. They understand the importance of the job that they do. They are sought out to be a part of the recruiting team. And so I'll be able to get you the exact retention numbers on that, but happy to provide that to you. But it's a pretty good rate of longevity when it comes to the recruiting position.
I was hopeful that you were going to say that, because I think my question is a leading one, which is, are the commanders and the lieutenants that are ostensibly in charge of making decisions to create these recruiting pipelines, are they provided with opportunities to get human resources certifications so that they can be properly trained on recruiting and human resources and the skill sets that, there are people that go to college to do this? Are they given opportunities to get that kind of training?
Yes, ma'am, they are. And we liaison with our HR department when it comes to our hiring. practices, how we vet them, how we post material, the type of content that we create, also the type of testing that we provide. HR is always involved in that process.
Okay, because I think what I saw when I saw the audit is just recruiting is a long-term game. It requires sustainable plans. It requires continuity plans.
It does.
And and it can't have plans that APD walks away from because they're short 10 people, you know. It's something that has to continue even if we see staffing shortages, because the staffing shortages now only get worse if we let go of the recruiting efforts. And I guess I'm most interested in hearing about, and it's not an answer for right now, but as you guys build your plans, I'm most interested in hearing about how you guys are building in sustainability, continuity, and what sort of safeguards you guys are going to have in place to continue. Yeah, go ahead, Commissioner Bernhardt.
So I think I didn't realize how related this question was, but I had a related question, which was why on earth we have a police lieutenant and a police sergeant running a department that largely requires civilian skills. Why don't we have an HR professional at the top of the food chain in this department? Because it would provide both continuity and much more expertise.
Yes, ma'am. So the HR director sits in for the department. Of course, it's a dotted line to the city. But our HR director sits in on all of our executive staff meetings, which I am a part of, and also attends our biweekly command staff meetings. And so the HR personnel are in close contact or in constant communication as to our recruiting efforts, what we're working on, and how we're doing that. We have essentially weekly meetings with the executive team, but then bi-weekly meetings with HR and commanders and lieutenants, and in those conversations, in those meetings.
Yeah, I guess I don't think that's the same thing. So, HR participates in the process, but I don't understand why HR doesn't run the process, or why we wouldn't have an HR professional. I mean, I understand there are issues in APD that sworn staff frequently won't actually answer to unsworn staff, in the sense that they perceive a hierarchy that sworn staff are not accountable to unsworn staff. But I don't understand why you wouldn't hire a HR professional to run this department, and not just have someone who's really busy in the city sit in on meetings to hear updates, because that's not a position of authority, and it's also not a consistent role every day.
Do we
Yes,
have?
ma'am. I appreciate. Please note that we are very much wanting to have the best hiring practices, and the more officers that we have, we know the better that we can serve our Austin community. And we know that our staff is critically short. So if there's anybody that is most motivated to do the best job in order to hire the best applicant, it's the men and women of our organization.
Do we have any additional questions? No, I think we have to move on.
Yeah.
We have to move on.
I do have one.
Yeah.
Thank you, Chief Henderson. So I know recommendation 4 was talking about youth engagement. I guess this is a little more, it sounds like it's a little more of an innovative process that you're taking with young adults. So are you imagining with that 4th recommendation that it would be different than, let's say, I can't think of the verbiage, but what is coming up for me right now is Civil Air Patrol, which is, I'm thinking of Paw Patrol right now for some reason, but something similar, something similar to current existing youth programs, or is this going to be completely from scratch, taking feedback from young adults to see if another new, innovative, engaging program comes out of it. Is that clarity on that question?
It does. No, and it's the latter. It's the latter. It is essentially creating a program that is basically directed by youth, and it is a grant program. We are one of the few organizations that were actually received the grant, so it's something that's innovative, something that's different, to where we're actually going to engage youth to help create a youth-driven program.
Okay.
Thank you for that. I know what I was going to say now. Explore. It had nothing to do with Paul.
Oh, okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I hate to cut it short, but I do want to move on to our next agenda item. I think I did not have time to pull a recommendation together with regards to the recruiting audit, but to echo some of what Commissioner Bernhardt said, I do feel like there is room for professionalized staff to have higher rank with regards to recruiting, to create a more efficient process, and without depleting patrol and taking valuable APD time. So we'll see if we have time to revisit that next